What's going on, everybody? You found Bottom Tier Collector. I'm your host, the Bigger One, bringing you bottom tier content from a bottom tier collector. Today, again, you've already read the headlines. We're straying away from the comic books. We're going into wrestling. I'm kicking off a wrestling series that I'm hoping I can drop weekly. Give me something to do along with the comic books. And I thought about doing this series several different ways, but I think the best way for me to do this and not have wrestling just take over the channel is I'm going to watch an entire pay-per-view and write down notes. Now, you'll have to forgive me in this video. I wrote down a lot of notes. A lot of notes. I even ran out of characters and had to have a second page. Just bear with me. I promise I'll try to talk to the camera and not read verbatim off the sheet. I'll try to add some personality to the video. But I thought it'd be cool to do. I've never seen a full Wrestlemania. I don't think I've ever seen a full Wrestlemania. I've seen like Razor Ramon versus Shawn Michaels ladder match, Ricky Steamboat versus Macho Man, Macho Man winning the tournament in WrestleMania 4. I've seen a multitude, Scott Hall, or not Scott Hall, Stone Cold and The Rock. Is it WrestleMania 17? I've seen matches, but I've never seen entire pay-per-views. And being a part of this fun comic book community that's also part wrestling fan, I'm kind of envious of some of the knowledge a lot of you guys have out there. So this is an attempt to study more about the history of wrestling and gain more knowledge. I don't know if I already mentioned this, but I'm doing a WrestleMania series. We're going to do the first 10 WrestleManias, and I'll run down every match. I'll try to be brief. I won't try to stretch this out too long. And then at the end, I'll give some thoughts, some, best match, best wrestler, favorite gimmick, or whoever. And then, that sort of thing. So, to kick off WrestleMania 1, brother, Hulk Hogan's in the main event, brother. We got Tito Santana versus the Executioner. And here in the notes, I put that Tito looked like an actual wrestler. And I made that a note because the Executioner looked like trash. Tito looked jacked. He had the red velvet jacket with a sequins font on his jacket. Did a couple cool moves. Overall, it was a garbage match. You got this guy that looks like a wrestler fighting a guy with a cut-off t-shirt and a hockey mask. It's terrible. And the Executioner's promo was terrible. Tito's promo was mediocre. He sounded like a wrestler, but he didn't feel like a wrestler. There was just something about Tito Santana that was just missing. He just didn't have the it factor for me to want to get behind him and root for him. And then the fact that he's squaring off against the Executioner, this joke of a guy who looks like he came from Coleman, Alabama's wrestling scene, debuting in WrestleMania. I don't know the context, back in 1985, if this was a normal thing to put straight jobbers on a ticket. But I would never in a million years put the Executioner on this card. He had a terrible knee spot. He Irish whips Tito Santana into the ropes. And Irish whips Tito and does the world's worst knee shot. Misses him by like a foot. And, Tito does his best to sell it. But, Tito kind of saved the match. He kind of carried the match. He had a cool high-flying elbow off the ropes. And he also, Executioner tried to execute a figure four leg lock onto Tito. And Tito was able to reverse it into a pin. That wasn't the final spot. But, that was one of the cooler spots in the match. Overall, I don't even want to say an appetizer for things to come. Just anybody could have done that match, in my opinion, and it's really anticlimactic that's the first match ever to kick off the history of WrestleMania. Again, I don't have context. I don't know if these kind of matches were normal in 1985. I don't know if the Executioner and guys like him were a dime a dozen. I don't know. I feel like there was more talent on the roster in 1985, but I guess you gotta work with what you got. So match number 2, we head into King Kong Bundy with his manager Jimmy Hart versus SD Jones or Special Delivery Jones. I thought Special Delivery Jones was a cute little thing. He's a cute little wrestler, but he ended up being cannon fodder for King Kong Bundy. King Kong Bundy comes in there looking like Butterbean. I made this in a previous take on this video. He looks like Butterbean, and I think the bald fat guy look definitely goes to King Kong Bundy. He definitely makes that look more menacing. King Kong Bundy definitely felt powerful in that match, because SD Jones is not a small guy. I don't mind that it was a squash match. A little disappointed we had a squash match in WrestleMania. I've never seen a King Kong Bundy match before, so I would have liked to have seen a full match to see what King Kong Bundy's got to work with. But I like it in terms of the storyline, the squash match. It really goes towards the legend of King Kong Bundy and how dominant of a force he is. Next up, we got Ricky Steamboat versus Matt Bourne. Another match that is pretty one-sided, although I'll say Matt Bourne is definitely a better wrestler than the Executioner and SD Jones. Feels like at this point in the pay-per-view, I'm calling it a pay-per-view, it wasn't a pay-per-view back in 1985. It feels like we're gaining momentum. They really did a great job of billing WrestleMania. They knew what they were doing. I put here in the notes that Steamboat overshadowed Bourne on the mic clearly. Bourne, he had a couple hiccup moments where he stammered through some lines, and Steamboat was fluid with it, entertaining. He had that it factor. What Tito Santana was missing, Steamboat had it all. Tito felt more like, he wished he could beat Ricky Steamboat. Although Steamboat and his Asian accent, he meant to say the word menace and he said meanness on the mic. So that was a little funny, made me chuckle, but Steamboat was beautiful on the mic. I said here, Bourne was clearly sent to the ring to do the job for Steamboat, who flexed his wrestling prowess. I really liked the spot of Steamboat had Bourne in a headlock, and Bourne would go to try and flip him over his back or try to pick him up to slam him, and Steamboat would backflip over Bourne and then wrench in the headlock again. And I thought that was a really cool spot. They did it 2 or 3 times, and then before it got overused, overdone, Matt Bourne finally picked up Steamboat and got the atomic drop on him. And then I thought the final spot was good. Steamboat crossbody Matt Bourne off the turnbuckle into the pin for the 1, 2, 3 count. Wasn't much of a match, I'll be honest, but Matt Bourne stayed in the ring long enough for Steamboat to flex his wrestling prowess and show what he can do. It felt like a warm-up match for Steamboat. It didn't really feel like Steamboat was really putting his entire repertoire into the match. Next up, we had a really interesting match: David Sammartino versus Brutus Beefcake with Johnny Valentine. And I wrote here that David Sammartino had the look and the wrestling. Clearly, his dad, Bruno Sammartino, the wrestling legend himself, one of the longest title reigns of all time. I don't know if he still has the longest title reign. Clearly taught David a thing or two, which David showed in the ring. But I wrote here that the delivery was a little poor. David wasn't very great on the mic, and it was a good thing his dad Bruno stepped in and kind of finished out the promo for him. I just didn't feel a lot of heat from David. It's just something missing there. He looked like a wrestler, he wrestled like a wrestler, but he couldn't tie it together on the mic. And mic skills take practice. Let's see, Johnny Valiant. What can I say about him? Very entertaining heel manager. Brutus didn't say too much on the mic. Maybe Brutus isn't very good on the mic. I know sometimes managers will do the speaking on the mic because the wrestler isn't very good on the mic, and they'll coach him up, make him a better product. And Valiant was great, classic heel. took off his glasses and talking about fighting Bruno, and cracked me up. I loved Valiant. And then Brutus Beefcake, it did its fair share of showboating in the ring. I thought it was great. Brutus, I wouldn't say is the most technical wrestler of all time. Very entertaining though. There were spots. It reminded me of Macho Man where David would get the upper hand and Brutus would get out of the ring and have to slow down the match and rethink his strategy. And the finish, I liked the finish. It was a double disqualification finish. David chased Brutus out of the ring. Brutus hit David out of the ring, where Johnny Valiant picked him up and slammed him on the concrete floor. And then Bruno interfered, and then it was just this brawl in the ring, which I think was set up for Bruno to get in the ring one last time. We were all waiting for Bruno to get back in the ring and fight, and we got it. And it was a double disqualification, and I think it was appropriate. I liked it. I don't know where David Sammartino went after this match. He needed a lot of polishing. But the wrestling was definitely there. Overall, better than Steamboat Matt Bourne. Definitely better than King Kong SD Bundy. And definitely better than Tito Santana versus Executioner. Now we're moving into, I feel like, the meat of the pay-per-view. We got Greg Valentine with Jimmy Hart. Jimmy Hart, apparently, I was listening to Gene Okerlund, who was talking about Jimmy Hart building a stable of wrestlers. I guess Greg Valentine was part of this stable. Greg Valentine at the time was the Intercontinental Champion fighting Junkyard Dog. This was an entertaining match. Junkyard Dog clearly was a crowd favorite. Got plenty of pop when he was shaking on the ropes, and had, it looked like he had Greg Valentine beat several times. I wrote that both wrestlers had plenty of time on offense. This felt like one of the more complete matches of the entire pay-per-view. We got both guys led the match a little bit, got featured, got to see their moves a little bit, got to see comebacks from both guys. And then Greg Valentine had the illegal pin. I like this, a typical heel finish. Greg Valentine pin, he rolled up Junkyard Dog for the pin and then leveraged his feet against the ropes. And as soon as that bell rings, Greg Valentine exits the ring. He's going to walk out with his belt. And then Junkyard Dog and whoever came to the ring with Junkyard Dog is having a conversation with the ref. And the ref decides to continue the match and counts Greg Valentine out. And so Greg Valentine is just irate that he lost the match, but he still keeps the belt and he walks out. And I like that finish. The heel loses the match, but Greg Valentine doesn't lose the belt. That's a great heel finish. It adds more fuel to the fire. It makes you hate Greg Valentine just a little bit more. And it also makes you think, next time Junkyard Dog is going to get him for real. Next up, we got in match 6, Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo with Captain Lou versus Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov with Classy Blassie, I think is his name. This is for the Tag Team Championship. And this was the Cold War all the way. You had this Team USA, looked like a USA Olympic wrestling team. Their promo was short and sweet. You just we're ready to go to work, Gene Okerlund. We're going to get in the ring. Versus Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov, who have this fiery promo. and then they go in the ring, Nikolai and Iron Sheik. And Nikolai, one of my favorite moments of the entire pay-per-view, Nikolai sends the crowd into a frenzy by singing the USSR national anthem. Love that moment. Let's see what else I wrote here. The match was built perfectly to stoke the passion of the crowd with the Cold War. Wrestling was good by both teams. We saw a lot of offense. We saw some dirty moves by Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov. Definitely typical heel wrestling, and saw the more clean All-American style wrestling from Rotundo and Windham. every time we got a tag and a house clear, as I call it, when you get tagged in a tag match, you usually clear the house. You put both the opponents on the floor and the crowd goes wild. That's kind of some wrestling formula there. And, got great pop every time Wyndham or Rotundo was tagged in. And what else did I put here? Yeah, I thought Sheik and Volkov, they did a great job. The whole thing was just this contrast. You had USA, you had Iran and Russia. You had these super clean-cut guys, clean-shaven, flowing 80s hair versus these, and then they also had a leaner, they were both jacked, Rotundo and Wyndham, but they still had this leaner look to them versus Volkov and Sheik were clearly jacked. Sheik could have been on steroids. I'm not sure. Sheik was huge. And they're just more angry, and they did, dirty moves leading up to the finisher where Sheik takes Blassie's cane and hits Barry Windham in the back, behind the ref's back, and then Volkov goes for the pin, and they get the belts clean. They exit the ring before Wyndham and Rotundo can argue, which was kind of an interesting thing to note now that I'm talking about it. Junkyard Dog gets a chance to talk with the ref about, hey man, I didn't lose, I was cheated. But Rotundo and Wyndham didn't talk to the ref, didn't say, hey, we were cheated and the legal device was used. You need to disqualify Sheik and Volkov. So, interesting that those finishes were back-to-back like that. Then we get Big John Studd with Bobby the Brain Heenan versus Andre Giant in a stipulation match, rewarding Andre the Giant $15,000 if Andre the Giant can body slam Big John Studd. And if Andre the Giant cannot do it, Andre the Giant has agreed to retire. Typical big man match, slow, a lot of punching. They didn't get down on the floor. Not any submissions really. But it wasn't boring. Even though it was slow, it was still entertaining. I did a great job of entertaining. And then Andre got the body slam on Big John Studd, which, he ended up getting the bag, the $15,000 cash bag. And Bobby the Brain snuck up behind Andre, stole the bag, and ran out of the ring. Big John Studd as well. So that's a really good spot. In the promos, I thought Big John Studd was so smooth. One of the best promos in the entire pay-per-view. And then Bobby the Brain also, silver spoon on the mic. And, quick with it on the mic. And they did great. I understand why you probably don't give Andre the Giant a promo. He's got that French accent. He's got the very deep voice that's hard to understand. And I get that, but I don't understand. He's so big with the fans. Everybody loves Andre the Giant at this point in his career. He's not playing heel yet. And it's just kind of interesting to note that he didn't get a promo. And then at the end of the match, he got a promo backstage with Gene Okerlund. And they had to cut away. He said, let me tell you something here, Big John Studd. And then they cut away from Andre the Giant. So interesting to note that they cut the promo he tried to film off. And then match number 8, we have Leilani Kai with Fabulous Moolah. So I'm guessing a legend in the ladies industry. I think Gorilla Monsoon was calling her a former women's champion. And then we have Wendy Richter and Cyndi Lauper. Now, if you watch my Zweihander challenge, the 10 album challenge, I think I mentioned how I love pop divas and I love Cyndi Lauper, love her music. And it was really cool seeing Cyndi Lauper at WrestleMania 1 being Wendy Richter's manager. The promos were okay. They weren't fantastic. They just got the job done. Leilani was a little better on the mic, but Wendy was okay. Wendy had more intensity about her. Moolah, bless her heart, she was stumbling through her lines. And Cindy, I know she's a public pop singer at this point in time, so she's more comfortable on the mic. But she was smooth with it, with what they gave her to say on the mic. I thought the move selling was a little over the top, a little too unbelievable. Didn't really like that. Lots of hair pulling. Didn't like that. If you're going to be a female wrestler, I want to see you wrestle. I don't want to see hair pull. That's high school fighting over boyfriend stuff. Not throwing women in a ring fighting for a belt. There was a manager skirmish on the floor. One of the ladies was kicked out of the ring, and then Moolah was trying to hit it. I think Wendy was knocked out of the ring, and Moolah was taking some shots at her. And then Cindy came over and pushed Moolah off. There's a little skirmish there. I liked that. I liked the fire there. I wasn't expecting that kind of play from Cindy. So that was fun to watch, the manager skirmish. And then there was a really cool spot of Richter catching. She Irish whipped Leilani into the ropes. And then when Leilani ricocheted back into Wendy, she caught her for over the shoulder slam. I thought that was a really cool spot. I was very impressed with Richter's wrestling to a point. The finishing spot was good as well. You have Leilani Kai going over the top rope. Wendy Richter's recovering from a backbreaker. She's dazed and confused. And Leilani crossbodies her over the turnbuckle for the 1-2-3 count. But Wendy Richter catches Leilani on the ground and rolls her over for the pin, the 1-2-3 count for the title, clean pin. And I thought, even though the bulk of the match wasn't that great, they had some cool spots to really put the match over and make it entertaining. And it really went well, I think, for a women's championship match and what a lot of people think of classic women's wrestling. They got a lot of pop from the crowd. And then last but not least, we have the main event, which felt like a main event. They brought out the guest announcer, which was Billy Martin, former manager of the New York Yankees, and they're in Madison Square Garden. So everybody's going crazy over this. I thought it was a cool move. They bring down Liberace, who's going to be the guest bell ringer. He does, you've seen it in your WWE Universe promos with, like the highlight reel when they show WrestleMania. They'll show Liberace kicking his legs up with the Rockettes. And then Muhammad Ali was the guest referee, which I liked. I liked Muhammad Ali. He had some good moments. And of course, the wrestlers, Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff, coming out to the Bagpipe Brigade with Cowboy Bob Orton, Randy Orton's dad, versus Hulk Hogan and Mr. T with Jimmy Snuka. I wrote here a main event that felt like a main event. Yeah, they were really building the crowd to what felt like a fever pitch. I mean, everybody was just going crazy before the bell even rung. A lot of entertainment, a lot of, great pre-match in-ring tension with everyone nearly ready to brawl before the bell. Wrote that down. Lots of pomp and circumstance to build the crowd's energy. They really just fueled the flames of the fans. They were going nuts by the time the match started. There's a moment where Bob Orton's trying to interfere, and then Muhammad Ali has to go over there and control Bob Orton and get him back down. I thought that was great. There's a moment where Piper decides he's going to leave the match, and I cackled at that. Probably my favorite moment in the match was when Piper thought he was just going to leave the match and be done with it. The main event at WrestleMania, and Roddy Piper's like, "No, over this, bro. Not happening." I will say Mr. T appears like he doesn't know what he's doing. There's a spot in the match where Paul Orndorff is all over Mr. T, and it just seems like Mr. T's just scrambling, kind of sprawling around on the mat, just trying to figure out a move, something to do. He was good with the slams. I feel like Hogan maybe taught Mr. T a few slams. I feel like I've heard this in an interview before, where Hogan didn't have a lot of time to train Mr. T, but he taught him a few slams, a few wrestling moves. But you could tell when Orndorff got him on the floor, Mr. T didn't exactly know what he was doing. Looked a little rough. I thought the finish was anticlimactic. You know, you got this great build-up, you know, and I'm used to seeing Hogan hulk up, big boot, leg drop, crowd's going wild, shaking, doing all that. Maybe he wasn't Hulk Hogan yet. Maybe that wasn't what he was at this time. But to have Bob Orton interfere in the match and single axe handle Paul Orndorff, and then the ref turns around and just sees Hogan on the floor pinning Orndorff, and that's how Hogan wins. It just feels anticlimactic. You want to see Hogan truly beat the bad guys. That's what we're building up towards in WrestleMania. Hogan's going to defeat Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff, and you didn't get it. You got Hogan winning at the expense of Bob Orton, and which is great for the heels. The heels took over WrestleMania 1, in my opinion. The heels won the day, but you know, it's still a good match, still an entertaining match, and I appreciate the entertainment side of it. Hogan and Piper, Orndorff, and Mr. T really driving that crowd and just holding what seemed like the world in their hands. So I'm going to give out my awards now. Best promo, I'd have to give it to Johnny Valiant. I thought he was just this great heel. He was silver-tongued on the mic, I thought, and would love to see more of Johnny Valiant and Brutus Beefcake in the future. The best spot of the pay-per-view, I have to give it to Wendy Richter catching Leilani Kai off the ropes for the slam. I was legit impressed with that. I didn't see that spot coming. It seemed like it came out of nowhere, and very impressed. Very impressed. You know, it wasn't the best match in the world, but they had some of the coolest spots of the pay-per-view. My favorite wrestler of the pay-per-view was Roddy Piper. Again, him thinking he's going to leave the main event in the middle of the match and just walk out. It's classic heel stuff. And then there's other times where he's barking at the refs. Classic heel, you know, move while Paul Orndorff's hitting Hogan behind the refs' backs. Piper was awesome. The best wrestler, and what I mean by that, the most talented wrestler of the pay-per-view, Ricky Steamboat. I mean, he was circling around Matt Bourne, and it just looked like a tune-up match. It looked like Steamboat had the main event, and Matt Bourne was just his tune-up match. And then best match, I'm not satisfied with the finish. I think my favorite finish of the entire pay-per-view was the Tag Team Championship match, Barry Windham, Matt Rotunda, Iron Sheik, and Nikolai Volkov. That's probably my favorite finish because, you know, I just think the heel finish was appropriate for that match. But a heel finish for the main event, I just didn't like Cowboy Bob Orton interfering like that. It just felt anticlimactic, and it kind of sucked some of the energy out of the match. But overall, I still give it the best match. It got all that pop. I was getting goosebumps watching Hogan and Piper and Orndorff work the crowd, and Mr. T as well. And it has to be. The main event has to be the best match, or your pay-per-view has failed, in my opinion. I thought it was booked well. As an overall pay-per-view, I thought it was booked well. Worst match was the first match. And each match kind of built steam. You had different finishes. You had a double disqualification. You had a squash match. You had a full match with a count-out victory. And then you had Hogan winning at the hands of Bob Orton interfering. You had some clean wins. It was Ricky Steamboat and Tito Santana winning clean. And just a very diverse match. I thought WrestleMania 1, obviously it was a success, and it felt like one watching it. It didn't feel like something that people look on with nostalgia and say it's a success just because of the history of WrestleMania. It really felt like they put something together that was successful. And I'm excited for WrestleMania 2. So that'll do me. I don't know where WrestleMania 1 falls into my favorite WrestleManias of all time. We'll have to build that list maybe at the end of this series. And we'll see how I feel. But I'm going to go ahead and say right off the bat, I don't think WrestleMania 1 is going to be an all-time WrestleMania for me. Just my opinion. Thank you for liking, subscribing, commenting. It's always much appreciated. And until next time, guys.